This will impact you. The judge was ruthless. Now gaming will change. So I have not pre-watched this, but I know that a lot of things have happened recently with the whole mobile market and how currencies are working on there. So let's see if this is what this is about. And hey, maybe we could be getting WoW on mobile soon, right? Yeah, great.
More than almost anything we talk about on the channel, today's story is actually going to tangibly impact you. So, for 5 years, there's been a battle waging at the highest levels of the games industry. It's massive, it's between Apple, it's between Epic, and it's around the principle of fairness. And the big news today is that Apple just lost. But they didn't lose because Epic Games outmaneuvered them.
That's right. If you don't remember what this was about, the Epic Games versus Apple lawsuit was about Epic Games not wanting to be forced into the Apple Store. And they did the same thing with Google. They ended up suing both of them, but they didn't want to be on the Apple Store because Apple and Google basically got 30% of all sales, and that included sales of their V-Bucks currency, right? So when they're getting all these impressionable children to buy that cool new skin, right? You got to get those Star Wars skins. Basically, every time somebody bought V-Bucks, if they were doing it on mobile, they would be forced to go through the Apple Store to buy the V-Bucks, and then Apple would get a 30% cut of that. So Epic, said that's not fair play. Apple's not doing anything. They're getting 30% of the cut. Apple would argue, well, you're using our platform to play your game, so we deserve a cut of your currency. It went back and forth. I guess Apple lost. I didn't realize Apple lost this lawsuit. This thing's been going on for like years now. So what does that mean? Well, it means that if WoW ends up on mobile, right, you can get your coins, what's it called? Buy your gold without having to pay Apple, right? Blizzard can just keep their WoW token money.
Any kind of insane gigabrain play from Tim Sweeney. No, they
Good
lost
for
because,
Epic, yeah.
in the words of the judge presiding over this decision, Apple leadership, quote, outright lied under oath, and in deciding not to comply with legal injunctions, Tim Cook, quote, chose poorly. It's an ominous thing for a judge to be saying to you. This, though, is a dramatic case. It has impacts that will reverberate across the entire games industry, and honestly, far wider than that, meaning it truly will impact everyone who watches this video. Here's how all this started. So, Tim Sweeney is a man on a mission, and it's a mission that's cost him and his company more than $1 billion over the last 5 years.
Damn, $1 billion. Fuck those lawyers, man. They're expensive. All lawyers are corrupt pieces of shit. That's right. You heard it from me.
Say that he's pretty committed. Now, 5 years ago is when he decided that Apple and Google's exclusive storefronts on their mobile platforms were in fact unreasonable monopolies. In his opinion, essentially, he says that they don't earn their 30% fee.
I'm an attorney, if you don't know already.
Rather, they
part-time now.
impose it, and that because of that, they're restricting how developers could make money and what sort of deals that they could actually offer to consumers. So what he decided to do was force their hand. So he started something called Project Liberty, and here's how it worked. Fortnite suddenly got an option where users could buy currency directly from Epic. Right? Directly, not through your Apple payment or Google payment thing.
Ooh, they're giving them a discount price? Yeah, they were regular price if you got it through the Google Play Store, and then discounted price if you got it directly from Epic Games. Yep. Damn. So they were funneling people to their own store.
Right? Directly, not through your Apple payment or Google payment thing. That, of course, meant that Apple and Google immediately booted Fortnite because it did break their store policies. And this is exactly what Tim Sweeney actually wanted. He wanted his game to be kicked off. And we pretty much know that because Epic immediately filed lawsuits that they had been preparing, and these were designed to force the stores to change those policies. Now, in the case of Google, it actually went so much better than any of us could have expected. Evidence actually emerged that certain developers like Activision had been paid not to rock the boat, and that they deleted documents and were—
Wait a minute, had been paid to not rock the boat? So they paid Blizzard Of course Blizzard Activision fucking took the money. Freaking goblin sitting there at the top. Good old Bobby Kotick. Fortnite developer Epic Games said Google paid the equivalent of $360 million to Call of Duty developer Activision Blizzard as part of a Brood agreement that included a promise the gaming giant would not create a rival app store. In filing the newly unredacted Thursday, Epic and Google paid other developers similar ways that they did to Activision. So they didn't want Battle.net being an app. Basically, that's what this was to do, was to stop Blizzard of Activision from releasing the Battle.net app on a mobile. They wanted you to have to go through their store.
paid not to rock the boat, and that they deleted documents and were broadly proven to have acted unfairly. They lost on all counts as determined by a jury. The platform was opened up to new stores and Google have appealed. It was a complete win for Epic, but their fight against Apple is an entirely different story. Things that began to look
Right,
quite...
so I mean, obviously with that kind of back-dealing corruption, you know, that's monopolistic shit, where you're paying off your competitors to not do shit. And probably that money anyways was being, you know, siphoned to the top anyway. It's not like the company was benefiting from it. So yeah, Epic won that one pretty easily, but they kept fighting against Apple.
For Epic,
okay.
But their fight against Apple is an entirely different story. Things that began to look quite bad for Epic. You see, the outcome of that initial trial, the original one, was an almost complete defeat for Epic Games. They basically could not prove being the emphasis word there, that any kind of monopoly or unfair action was going on. But there was one exception.
So they didn't have the easy evidence against Apple that they did against Google.
An injunction was placed against Apple, and this was to end anti-steering provisions. You might think, what is anti-steering? Well, it's actually pretty simple. So basically, it meant that Apple could no longer prevent developers from directing users to make purchases outside of the store. So basically, steering you, the customer, somewhere else. So as an example...
the customer should have the freedom to pick which platform they use to purchase things. And if Apple wants people to use their platform, then they just need to make it more accessible, make it the easier thing to do. But it becomes steering when you're legitimately forcing them into your platform. That's the difference.
That would be
giving customers a choice, and customers choosing to use Apple as their go-to to purchase things is not a bad thing. But when you don't give the customer the choice, and maybe they want to go directly through what's it called, through Epic, then you're harming them. You're harming the customer. You're not giving them choice. You're acting as a monopoly at that point.
Buying V-Bucks in Fortnite through a web client rather than through Apple's purchasing system, which would thus avoid Apple's 30% cut. Now, at the time, the judge said that Apple should be entitled to something, but that they can't force people to use their in-app purchase systems. Apple then spent 3 years appealing, and, you know, it's Apple, they can afford lawyers, but they really got nowhere on that front. And this is when that same judge came back and filed a new injunction against Apple for their behavior in the last 3 years. And this one truly is remarkable, and depending on how things shake out, there could even be a criminal component. It's quite wild. So, it wasn't just for a lack of compliance with the original order, but for contempt of court, which is usually frowned upon.
Damn.
So much so that they've been referred to the U.S. Attorney's Office to consider criminal contempt proceedings.
They're not going to put Tim Cook in jail for this. I mean, yeah, that would be kind of cool, but that's not going to happen. But contempt of court, it's not a joke.
That would be dramatic. Now, the judge essentially was not pleased that Apple implemented new costly fees around off-app purchases, where basically they were effectively replacing one anti-competitive process with another. Meaning,
so they were saying, okay, we're not going to force you to use ours. You can pick, but if you pick the other one, it's going to cost you more. So of course, then they're doing the same thing. They're funneling customers back to theirs, basically forcing them to do so, or they get fined.
Of course, devs lose, but also us customers lose. And while they were doing all that, they were also misleading the court over what they were doing. Here's a quote. That it thought this court would tolerate such insubordination was a gross miscalculation. As always, the cover-up made it worse. For this court, there is no second bite of the apple.
Yeah, this judge was pretty clever. I like that one.
Yeah, GG judge, quite the zinger. So she laid out then some clear rules. These are practices that Apple are banned from.
Right type.
Number 1, imposing a fee on purchases made outside an app. That means that they have no reason, therefore, to track those purchases, the ones made outside an app. Ban number 2, setting conditions on how devs can direct users outside of an app, including restricting how links work. Basically, you know those design anti-patterns that are just trying to get you, the consumer, to clearly do something by, making a link look weird or a misleading design, that sort of thing. Third, banning certain types of app from directing users to outside purchases. And finally, using, quote, emotive language to persuade consumers to remain in the in-store purchase system. Basically, scaring people who don't know better.
You.
And, well, we've actually seen Apple do some
the alert, basically, that'll pop up that'll say, hey, you are leaving the ecosystem. This could be a not trusted source. Or you could just go back to the ecosystem and purchase in there. And, Apple basically doing that is that they're scaring you to stay in their ecosystem.
Things saying you can go and make a purchase, not using the App Store, but, the App Store is very secure and very safe, which, to an average person who's not tech savvy, could basically look like it's Apple saying, hey, you could get scammed if you don't click this link. P.S. This link gets us lots of money too. And of course, the reason why these things are banned is, well, because Apple had been doing all of these things. That's what's led to this whole case. Now, in response, they have now begun complying and appealing. It'll be interesting to see how malicious their compliance is. I imagine it will be as malicious as is humanly possible without getting in even more trouble. But all of this is happening while the rest of the industry is licking its lips. Some developers already had updates to go in this. Spotify were a major one. They framed this as a huge consumer win, which in fairness I would say it absolutely is. Now we can do insane things like manage our subscriptions in an app. We can use different payment options and we can see costs. You can now buy Kindle books in the Kindle app. Patreon memberships are no longer marked up on iOS to counteract the store tax.
Well, and I think actually wasn't Twitch subs. Have you guys ever purchased a Twitch sub on mobile and seen that it was marked up, or it's more expensive on mobile than it is if you directly do it like through your PC on Twitch? I'm pretty sure this was why. It was because Apple was getting a share of it if you purchased it through iOS, or Google was doing the same. I've seen that on mobile. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is why. So that shouldn't be a thing anymore.
Lots of things. But of course, let's bring it back to Tim Sweeney and Epic Games. So, the Epic Games Store mobile version already existed as of last year, but now they are really ramping things up. Within a week of the ruling, Epic announced their web store fee would drop to 0% for your first $1 million in revenue, with that starting this June. That's obviously pretty awesome if you're a dev.
Nice.
Plus, much like they have...
This is great because it breeds competition. That's what it does. So you'll have the Battle.net app, you'll have your Epic Games app, and then you'll have your, Apple iOS gaming app. And basically, everyone has to create the best app to keep the customer there, rather than Apple just saying, well, we don't have to really create the best app. They don't have a choice. They got to use ours. And that's why monopolies are a bad thing for the customer. Competition breeds excellence. And without competition, you're just going to have, the guy sitting on his laurels and say, yep, I'll charge whatever I want. I'll do whatever I want. People will have to use my thing.
Have done with the Epic Online Services stuff, what they've done
I don't sub to lawyers.
is build a solution that people can use regardless of platform. So be it Google, be it Apple, anything. But more than that, it doesn't need to be the literal Epic Games Store. That's because web shops can basically run on their infrastructure, and that will let any developer go outside Apple's payment system with no fuss. Yes, Tim Sweeney's definitely taken this one personal, and you know what? I'm here for the drama.
You know what I'm wondering is does Steam have a mobile app for mobile games? I've actually never even tried to download Steam on my phone. I'm not a mobile gamer, so I don't even know what exists out there. But does Steam have an app store game or an app store thing that will allow you to download games? I mean, I see Steam Mobile. I see a Steam Mobile app. Yeah, it looks like it's there is an app on here for Steam. Can you actually purchase things on it? Oh, not games, but Steam Mobile. I'm not sure actually what's available on here. With free Steam Mobile app, you can take Steam with you anywhere, buy PC games, and get the latest game communities while on your protected Steam account. So you can buy your PC game on here, but you can't play it on here. Protect your Steam account, browse the PC Steam catalog. So I don't think they offer any actual mobile games that you can purchase on here yet. But imagine Steam gets into this whole competition. That'd be crazy. You can. Sam about to download Roblox. My son loves that game. But yeah, interesting. So I mean, Steam can get a full competition here with these guys.
Anyway, it is great for devs, but players are also being incentivized here, where you're going to get 5% reward points through purchases on those shops and the Epic Games Store, but that's boosted to 20% until the end of August. So that essentially is the big clap back against Apple. But there is the other thing.
Steam Deck, yeah, that's a whole system.
So Tim Sweeney has proposed that Fortnite can return to app stores within weeks, like super quick, provided Apple allows them to do so. He also said he'll drop all litigation as part of a peace plan, provided Apple roll out this policy worldwide. And instead, as of the time of writing and recording this video, Apple have, went and blocked the Fortnite submission. Now, of course, all of this legal maneuvering so far is only in the US. The current policy implementation on Apple's side only applies in that region right now. Fortunately, though, for those of us benefiting from EU rules, we've already had some things for months already, and Apple can't stop it. An absolute bomb was dropped in the industry in March of this year when both Google and Apple were found to be in breach of the Digital Markets Act by the EU Commission. And this is pretty damn big stuff. They can absolutely sting these companies. So with Google, it was for anti-steering practices, and Apple was for blocking third parties from interfacing with their systems. Now, this follows last August's, told you we'd come back to that.
Honestly, when it comes to protecting gamers, Europe's been always been further ahead than the U.S. The U.S. tends to favor, free market competition. Okay, we're not gonna interfere. We'll let the market, dictate what happens, unless it's monopoly shit, and that's what was happening here. So the U.S. will always counter monopolistic tendencies, but Europe has always been, more aggressive in counteracting games industry practices that are devious, right? Like in-game currencies and gambling and stuff like that. They've always been ahead of the U.S. on that kind of stuff. How is my favorite Canadian comment? I don't even know what you're saying. Ask in French because I don't understand French. I don't. C. Sam doesn't care about Cambro. Typical lawyer. Did you know? Yes, I know you subbed. I saw it. I called you out.
Ruling that Apple had
6 months
to open their platform up to alternative stores, and another breach from Apple in April of this year, also on steering. Now, in that last case, they also faced a cool little €500 million fine for what was absolutely flagrant breaches of the law. Apple are obviously appealing because that's what you do.
Yeah, I was just thinking, though, if this really starts to become a thing, that means Battle.net will be able to offer you Candy Crush directly, right? Because all those King's games, those are all owned by Activision Blizzard. So if Battle.net, and that's one of the biggest games on the Apple App Store, Candy Crush is huge. So then they could basically just, subvert all the Candy Crush money that has to go to Apple right now because people purchase that shit in there and give it all straight to Blizzard Activision / now Microsoft.
Do when you're a company, but there's a clear thing. There's a clear
like you could have a Microsoft Games app even or something.
Shifting. Now, it's not going to happen in all regions, but we are seeing regulation over major platforms to protect consumer interests from companies who otherwise would control them. So between that and, I guess, a billionaire slap fight led by Tim Sweeney, well, look, we should take these wins when we can get them. Not to bring up an old drama, and it is a bit of a different story, but I suppose a little bit like how Hulk Hogan versus Gawker was, in fact, Peter Thiel versus Gawker. This is all kind of billionaire slap fights. Now, the thing with Tim Sweeney, right? He does have good principles. There are good principles that he talks about, right? And yes, it's good he's trying to hold Apple to those, but that does not make Tim Sweeney automatically on your side. Sometimes it just so happens that we're aiming at the same target. Now, he will end up benefiting from this massively and in a financial way. And of course, that's because his company is the one building the wraparound solutions that power these out-of-app purchases. And that's really big. And that means that we can appreciate the consumer good that this does. We absolutely can. And the work that the regulators are doing to break down these walled gardens. And in an ideal world, right, once the walled garden is so big and so ubiquitous, you might have to, restrict the freedom of Apple to go and run a monopoly, because not only will it be good for consumers, it will also be good for competition.
Right.
But I also do think, Standard Oil gets broken up. Who's left with the money to gobble up all the assets? Oh, pretty much the same people. So there's always that thing then where you can have these good pro-consumer regulations, but it's the incumbents with the resources who are immediately able to get around them or exploit the new opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, this is not going to benefit, your small indie dev companies. This is just large companies going after larger companies. And who's going to benefit it? It's the large companies, right? They're not. It's benefiting the consumer in that they have a choice of where to purchase their items now. But at the end of the day, the money, it's a fight between billionaires, like you said, slap fight between billionaires. This is not going to benefit the two guys creating a development studio and making a game. They're still going to have to pick. Now they can offer their thing through the Epic Games Store and iOS now. That's a choice, and then they could kind of forum shop and see which one's going to take a smaller percentage of their earnings. They could do that too.
Games basically, doing its store as a backend to do payment providing for everybody else. Well, while it is good because it means there is more competition, it also does disproportionately benefit Tim Sweeney. So,
of course.
Tim Sweeney, you know what? You have led to a domino of events that I think is absolutely good for consumers, and I think it's good for developers. But that does not mean we will not be critical of you. And on the topic of the good guys being, let's just say, a little bit rumbly, okay, we have to talk about Capcom, and the good news is you can actually watch that video right now. The link is about to replace my face on the screen.
Interesting video. Interesting fallout from that case suit. Now, Apple is continuing it. They're appealing again, so they're going to appeal the decision. We'll see what happens there. I doubt Apple's going to win. They're basically just kind of pissed off right now at Mr. Sweeney and everything that Epic Games did, so they're going to prolong this as much as they can, milk as much money out of this Epic, and force them to kind of prolong the whole proceeding. And the people who win at the end of the day for a really long proceeding, who is it? The fucking blood-sucking lawyers. That's right. It always goes back to those guys. Nice video, though, from Billionaire.